were two two questions that were posted in the group. One question from Janine. She writes, if we can see the eye consciousness is trained through experience, recognizing the ethnicity of people we encounter, it seems it would be possible to train it to see all phenomena as conditioned, impermanent, functional, and produced. Once one has strong conviction that all objects perceived by a valid eye consciousness must have these qualities, as a result of this conviction and familiarization would not be different than seeing that something with a certain shape is a vase. Well, the thing is, what you mentioned, Janine, being conditioned, being impermanent, being functional, being produced, that does not directly relate to its visual aspects. Of course, it's visual aspects that appear conditioned, impermanent, and so forth. But for instance, the ethnicity, we recognize someone's ethnicity on the basis of or based on visual cues. Um, and again, for instance, well, Lati Rinpoche in Mind in Tibetan Buddhism says that through familiarity, you can actually recognize that someone is your father with your eye consciousness. I mean, it wouldn't be explicitly apprehended. It'll be it would be implicitly apprehended because explicitly you only perceive or you only apprehend shapes and colors. But like I said, not everyone agrees with this. However, let's assume, okay, so you can recognize something as this, that, and the other through familiarity. But again, those are visual cues. So you can train. I don't know whether I want to use the word train, but yes, so your mind, you can habituate your sense consciousnesses to recognizing that someone is your father, that someone is from Asia, and so forth. But you can't train it to do limitless things, especially if it's something hidden such as, well, definitely being impermanent, that's a hidden phenomenon. The others are not hidden, they're not slightly hidden, but they're abstracts. They're abstracts. And first of all, they do appear to your mind, but that's all. So talking about training, yeah, you can train, for instance, a dog, but you to do certain things, but you can't train a jellyfish to do the same thing. So similarly here, in the case of the mental consciousness is able to do certain things that you can definitely train in many amazing ways. However, the same doesn't apply to the sense consciousnesses. So it's not that you cannot at all affect the sense consciousness in a way through habituation, like I just said, recognizing. It doesn't say anywhere that you can recognize the ethnicity of someone, but if you can recognize your father, then if you're familiar enough with a particular ethnicity, then that should apply as well. But again, the cues are all visual. Does that help? So that everything else is so abstract, being impermanent, like having causes and conditions changing moment by moment, giving rise to results, and so on.
Yeah, I get that. I guess what my thought was is that it wasn't like each individual thing that you see, you would need to have that mental process or you would need to think about it because it would just be sort of this general thing that you could say, oh, it's a thing I can see. Therefore, I now have conviction that this is how it is, in the same way that I would say, look at my father and recognize him as my father. In a way that seems also to be a bit of a abstract. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, it's not so much that it's not that the eye consciousness thinks, oh, that's my father.
Mm.
I mean, we have to talk about it. So it seems
Mm.
as if we're saying that, but that's of course not what happens. Basically, you recognize uh, the body of your father, right? So the eye consciousness doesn't need to think about it or doesn't need a mental consciousness to think about whether that is my father or not. So through familiarity, and again, yeah, well, never mind. Yeah, so as I said, it is a little tricky that one, and not everyone agrees. But basically, the mental consciousness would do what you're describing through familiarity with impermanence and so forth. You perceive an object, and there's the mental consciousness's thought, oh, this is impermanent, this is changing all the time. But it wouldn't be the I consciousness. It would be impossible. Yeah. Okay, and then Tripti asks, when the texts say that some conceptual cognitions can take conditioned things as their direct object, does this open a pathway to understanding how conceptual reasoning can approach emptiness, even though it may not yet realize emptiness? Um, well, first of all, what type of uh, conceptual cognitions take conditioned things as their direct objects? What type of cognitions? What would be the apprehended object of these conceptual cognitions? Would it be permanent or impermanent?
It would be still permanent, I think.
No, it would always be impermanent.
Hmm.
Always be impermanent. When the text says that some conceptual cognitions can take conditioned things as their direct object, the text is saying, oh, those conceptual cognitions that the main object of which is impermanent. So it's really just saying direct object means appearing to that mind. The meaning of direct object is it appears. So the direct object of a conceptual consciousness is the conceptual consciousness. The direct object of a conceptual consciousness is, sorry, I was just distracted. The direct object, yeah, of a conceptual consciousness apprehending vase is the vase. And if you take any other object, the direct object of a conceptual consciousness apprehending table, it's table. So whatever appears to a particular conceptual consciousness is its direct object. They have the same meaning, appearing to a conceptual consciousness and being the direct object. Now, when we hear about meaning generality, when we learn about meaning generality, that seems to mean to us it seems to mean like the only thing that appears to our conceptual mind when we think about a vase, for instance, is the meaning generality of vase. That's the sense we get because of the emphasis being on the meaning generality. But what we shouldn't forget, what we mustn't forget, is that a particular mind, whether it's a non-conceptual or a conceptual mind, can never know its main object without the main object appearing. It always has to appear, its main object. I'm not saying that you cannot know something implicitly, as in the case of a blind person, implicitly knowing the shape of a color while knowing the tactile aspect of the vase. So you can also know the shape of the vase. But in general, like, well, not just in general, like for any kind of main object, whatever mind, if there's a mind that its main, so whichever consciousness, conceptual or non-conceptual, and of course, we're not talking about wrong consciousnesses. So when it knows its main object, when it apprehends its main object, it can only do so through the appearance of that main object.
So that includes for a memory. So even the memory of my mother, she appears.
Yes,
And that's
absolutely.
the only way
Yeah.
I can.
Yes, but she appears mixed with the meaning generality. So mixed in such a way that we're not aware at all, or we cannot differentiate between the meaning generality and your mother. To that mind, those two appear as mixed. And appearing as mixed, therefore, it's impossible. It's impossible for something, so for us to actually know. So what's the difference between the meaning generality between the actual object? In the Prasangika school, I said that we are aware, or we realize, the mind realizes always that which appears to it. And according to the Prasangika school, the mind always knows, or the mind always realizes, even if it's a wrong consciousness, what appears to it. And I think we know from our own experience that that is true, because we know what appears to our eye consciousness when we think of a car, for instance. So we spoke about this before. What appears to the conceptual, what color? I ask you, what color appears when you think of a car? So in that case, you could all tell me what color appeared to your mind. Why? Because according to the Prasangika school, and that's of course the highest school, and therefore actually what they explain is accepted to be what really happens. I mean, we studied the Satantrika, but only temporarily. But taking it from the Prasangika school point of view, the fact that we always perceive what appears to us, well, we kind of know that. We know that's true, right? We know that it's true. If I think of my mother, I know what appears to my mind. But what I don't know is which part of what appears to my mind is the meaning generality and which part is the actual object. That we can't differentiate. Right? Does that make sense? And anyway, actually, they say it's really the meaning generality that the appearing object that your mind knows is really the meaning generality. That's the part it knows. But since that part is known through its appearance and it's mixed with the appearance of your actual object, yeah, so it's difficult again to distinguish.
Yeah, thank you.
But then it doesn't have anything to do with I mean, have nothing to do, it's not correct to say it doesn't open the pathway to understanding how conceptual reasoning can approach emptiness, in the sense that, well, before I can know the emptiness of a vase, I better know what a vase means. I mean, I have to it's not enough to just see a vase. I have to conceptually also know what a vase means. I have to analyze it. I have to analyze what is the vase made of? What are its parts? Understand its interdependence, for instance, understand it's not one with its part, it's not separate from its part. So in that way, yes, without the vase appearing to that mind, it couldn't be explicitly apprehended. It couldn't be the main object of a conceptual consciousness. And if there's not enough familiarity with the vase, how could I know its emptiness? Right, conceptually. So in that way, of course, you're right, but it's not merely
the
because the vase appears. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Are there any other questions? No? Okay. Then let's go back to the text. I think we got to page, well, in my text, it's 290. It says, moreover, in the case of objects, they are also objects as cognized. Explicit objects, implicit objects, focal objects, and so forth. Did you find that in your text?
Yes.
What
Yeah.
page numbers?
248.
248. Okay, great. All right, 248. Now, what the authors are saying here is the most common, common objects are, of course, the appearing object and the engaged object. The engaged object and the engaged object and the appearing object. I guess those terms are used the most. But then there are other objects as well. For instance, here they say explicit objects and implicit. Before it was direct object, and huh? Didn't even notice that they switched the terminology. The explicit object is an object that appears. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's in Tibetan, it's just ngul. So actually, before they used direct object, and now they use explicit object. I think explicit is better. I didn't even notice that switch. In Tibetan it says ngul, shul. It didn't change. Unless I'm totally mistaken. Venerable Tekcho, did it change? Did you notice? No, in Tibetan.
Oh, no, in Tibetan it's the same.
It's the same, right? Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, so explicit object, implicit object, that's definitely less misleading. Although in Tibetan, it literally says direct and indirect. The words that I use for direct and indirectly are used as well. Okay, so objects as cognized. Actually, that's a slightly unusual term. Zindangyul, it means zindangyul. So actually, zin means apprehend. I guess you could translate it as apprehend. Yeah, zin. Zindangi. Zindang means the mode of apprehension. So it's saying the object of the mode of apprehension, but that doesn't mean anything. What does that even mean? So I cannot tell you what is the etymology of that. maybe it simply means that the object by which you understand, like if you know this is the object of that mind, you can tell how it is apprehended by that mind. But I don't know. I'm just guessing here. What is the exact etymology, the origin of that term? I can't tell. I mean, it goes back to the Sanskrit, of course, and then we would have to know Sanskrit and Sanskrit etymology to explain it, and that becomes very complicated. Here, the translators chose to translate it as object as cognized. That as is supposed to reflect mode, the mode of apprehension, right? The mode. So Zin, Dang means mode of apprehension, Yul means object. So object as apprehended, object as cognized. I don't know why they say cognized here now. Why not use apprehended? But never mind. It doesn't matter. So anyway, it's just another word for engaged object. Sometimes you say Jul, which means engaged object. Sometimes you say Zinangyul. But they mean the same thing. So the object as cognized and the engaged object mean the same thing. Then you have, of course, explicit objects, implicit objects, focal objects. That's an important term, a term that is used quite frequently, the focal object. All right, so let's look at all of them. It says here, a pot is the object as cognized for an eye consciousness apprehending a pot. Okay, so a pot is the object as cognized for an eye consciousness apprehending a pot. Yeah, so it's the engaged object for an eye consciousness apprehending a pot. That's really what it's saying. And for conceptual cognition apprehending a pot. Yeah, so for both. The pot itself is the engaged object, therefore the object as cognized for those two minds. Impermanent sound is the object as cognized for a direct perception and for an inferential cognition. Impermanent sound is the object as cognized for a direct perception and for an inferential cognition, realizing sound to be impermanent. Okay, I was like, what? That was an ear consciousness apprehending sound. No, it says impermanent sound. Of course, it's here the object as cognized or the engaged object of, let's say, a yogic direct perceiver realizing sound to be impermanent, or of an inferential cognizer or inferential cognition realizing sound to be impermanent. Again, it's the engaged object. Likewise, permanent sound is the object as cognized for a conceptual cognition apprehending sound to be permanent. So cognition, as we've learned, I mean, at least from the translation, the way the word cognized or cognition is used, it doesn't mean to realize, because the translators chose to use it for the word law, which just means cognition. I mean, here they chose to use it for the word law, which means awareness usually, and it means to be aware. Therefore, it's okay. A wrong consciousness apprehending permanent sound is aware of permanent sound. Therefore, it's not wrong to say cognized. I mean, what does cognized usually mean? I thought cognized kind of means that you know something. That was my understanding, which is why I don't know why the translators chose this word. I mean, I think it's good to stick to the English translation as long as it's possible. Sometimes, of course, we have to make adjustments. The English terms that we use borrow basically from the English language in order not to have to make up new terminology to talk about Buddhism as the Tibetans did. We just have to redefine some of the terms. But I think we should make an effort to keep as close as possible to the original meaning. Anyway, I think they could have just said as the object as apprehended. Yeah, so anyway, for conceptual cognition, okay, then you have, of course, that repetition, conceptual cognition apprehending sound. So that may not sound that good, but well. Permanent sound is the object as cognized for a conceptual consciousness apprehending sound to be permanent, and a rabbit's horn is a rabbit's horn. Oh yeah, right. But in Tibetan, it doesn't say horns, actually. Okay, a rabbit's horn. Probably thinking like just one ear is kind of like, like sometimes the ears, they At least in cartoons. I'm not sure, like, is this true in actual, like in cartoons, like one ear is kind of like bent over, but not in, I don't think in real life that they actually, bend over or like are folded over. Well, anyway, so a rabbit's horn. A rabbit's horn. What does that even mean? You only see one ear as a horn and the other one you don't? Well, I don't know. Thus, in the case of a cognition that accords with reality, since things are the way it apprehends them, its object as cognized exists. Its object as cognized. Does that sound good in English? Doesn't sound good to me in English. No? Okay. And in the case of a mind that does not accord with reality, since things are not the way it apprehends them, its object as cognized does not exist. All right. As for the explicit object and implicit object, the explicit object of a cognition is an object that appears or whose image arises in that cognition. The explicit object of a cognition is an object that appears or whose image arises in that cognition. Image. I don't think, again, it's a good idea to use image here, because we would even say to an ear consciousness, when to your ear consciousness, when you listen to a sound, for instance, the sound of water, the sound of water appears to your mind. So an aspect of water, which is water itself, appears to your mind. That's the Tibetan way of saying it. I don't even think it's necessary to translate it word by word. In Tibetan, you have two words for appearing. One way of saying that something appears is saying nawa. Nawa just means appearing. But then you have another word, which is namba sharva. Namba sharva. So namba usually means the thing itself, its aspect, which means the thing itself, and it arises to that mind, or literally like the sun rises. Like shar is also the word for like the sun rises. So namba sharva means it rises to the mind, or it arises in the mind. So something arises in the mind. But that's just another way of saying appearing. Whereas if you say its image arises, you seem to be saying it's the generic image. Yeah, so I don't know. It's image, or at least, okay, so if you say the appearance of the vase, that is the image of the vase. All right. Namba Shava Pumba. But you don't even put it that way. You don't even say, you don't use the appearance and the aspect of the vase interchangeably. You don't do that. Only when you use the verb, you say the vase appears, or the aspect of the vase arises in that cognition. Anyway.
Geshma, might another word for image be like impression?
Impression. But impression is something subjective, isn't it? I've got a certain impression. That's too subjective. In the Sautrantika school, is the actual thing appearing. The actual thing casts an aspect, right? That's also some of it's also the vocabulary that is used in some places. So the object casts an appearance, casts an aspect of itself. Right? So that's what it means here. So an aspect of itself, arises in that cognition. The implicit object of a cognition, although an object of that cognition does not appear or arise as an aspect in that cognition. Yeah, the implicit object doesn't appear. Of course, the implicit object doesn't appear, and therefore there's no appearance, and therefore no aspect of that particular object arises in that mind. It seems like I'm basically spending so much time on just saying not like this, not like this. Yeah, maybe I'm just totally wrong about it, but and I'm not saying everything. There's some beautiful sections that are really well written, but just a few things about the words. So, for example, it says, since a conceptual cognition apprehending a pot explicitly realizes the pot and implicitly realizes the exclusion of non-pot. Oh, I know who put that in there. That is, again, to realize the exclusion of non-pot. I think that's just such an inappropriate term. Why? Because what this is saying here, in Tibetan it's Pumba Maimbala Lokpa, which is really just saying the opposite of non-pot.
Hmm.
Now, the opposite of non-pot is pot, and
Mhm.
pot is the opposite of non-pot. But the
Mhm.
pot is not the exclusion of non-pot,
Mm.
right? When we actually think pot, so the mind performs, when we think pot with a conceptual consciousness, the mind performs an activity of exclusion. So exclusion is the activity performed by, for instance, a conceptual consciousness, which basically instantaneously isolates everything that is not the pot. So that's okay. In that context, it's okay. It's an activity. You refer, that's actually something the mind does. So to say the mind excludes, it clears away, it isolates everything that is non-pot, like it isolates pot by way of excluding everything that is non-pot.
But does
Uh,
it realize it, Geshe-ma, then?
well,
The
it
word
doesn't,
realize seems to say it's like a collective, which it's not. This is the conceptual mind.
the conceptual mind realize things. This
Yeah,
is
but
like, yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking, Geshe-ma, that it would realize the object, the direct object it was trying to perceive. But
What is
it does
it? The
the
conceptual mind.
vase. Sorry?
Oh, the conceptual mind or the
Yeah, the
vase.
conceptual mind.
Yeah, the conceptual mind. So it what does it do?
It would realize the object by excluding everything that is not the object.
Exactly.
But then why would it realize implicitly other things? Because its job is to exclude.
No, its job is to exclude its main object, like its
Yeah.
main object.
Yeah.
Here we're talking about the main object. In the case of a conceptual consciousness, for instance, its main object is the, like, let's say the conceptual consciousness apprehending vase. Its main object is the vase. So what
Right.
is its main job? To understand vase at the and exclude everything that is non-vase in order to fully understand. But then implicitly, it also knows, what else does it know? That there's no common locus. There's nothing which is both a vase and a non-vase. It knows the opposite of not vase. It knows all that implicitly.
Mhm.
I mean, there's no contradiction here, of course, because once you exclude everything that is non-vase, then, and that's through the meaning generality, then there's no contradiction that you would also know the opposite of non-vase. But implicitly, that doesn't appear to the mind. Okay. But my problem is with the term, because in Tibetan it says Pumbamai Melopa, which means the opposite of non-pot or reverse from non-pot. But reverse, I don't think is a good translation. Opposite from non-pot. That is pot. Opposite from non-pot is pot. And the pot is the opposite of non-pot, the opposite of non-pot, and the opposite of non-pot is the pot,
It is.
right? So the exclusion, I think I don't think exclusion is the right term. It is said that the pot is the explicit object of the conceptual cognition apprehending a pot, and the opposite of non-pot is the implicit object of the conceptual consciousness apprehending a pot. Yeah. Likewise, an inferential cognition realizing that sound is impermanent explicitly cognizes sound as impermanent and implicitly cognizes sound as not permanent. So you see, yes.
So so when one has a inferential cognizer that knows that sound is impermanent,
Hmm.
then its direct cause is I guess would be like an inferential cognizer which knows that product is the three modes.
Hmm.
So would its object as cognized be product is the three modes in the proof that sound is impermanent? Or would it be like product is the property of the subject, forward privation and counter privation?
Sorry, say that again. You're saying the direct cause of the inferential cognizer realizing the impermanence of sound. Its direct cause is the inferential cognizer or the conceptual mind that apprehends or that knows the three modes simultaneously, right?
Right?
Yeah. So then what did you say after that? I think that's the first thing you said. And then
So
did
for that consciousness, which knows that like perhaps product is the three modes.
okay, that's the mind that precedes the inferential cognition, apprehending sound is apprehending pot is impermanent, yes.
So it would just know like product is the three modes, or would it know like product is the
It
property
fulfills the
that-
three it would know, I guess it would definitely know that pot fulfills the definition of the three modes. Not pot, sorry,
product?
product. Product. It would know that product fulfills the definition of, like, to know the three modes, you need to know the definition,
Yeah, right.
right?
Yeah.
So what is actually what are the three modes when you posit it? Of course, it is product itself. However, to know the three modes, you need to know the three definitions. So I can't say that in English. I just can say that. That's the definition of no, that's the definition. That's cancer. So the person of the second mode realizes that that the product is ascertained as that object's as existing only for that object's harmonious blah. I don't know. I'm trying to translate it here. I'm sure you have a
All of them.
translation of each of the three modes. So just
Mhm.
think that if in order to know that product fulfills these three modes or is the three modes, you need to know that product is each of those definitions.
So I guess my question is sort of about like how much information can a single consciousness know? It can
Ah,
know sound is impermanent,
ah,
but
ah.
can it know
Okay.
product is present in only the set of concordant classes and absent and all of the like all
Wait,
of this?
single. Okay, needs to be defined here. First of all, what do you mean with single?
What do I mean by a single consciousness?
Do you mean a single moment or a single continuum?
Well, I guess it would have to be a continuum.
Yeah, it has to be a continuum. So depending on what you say is what you mean with single. For instance, when you talk about a mind that realizes the Four Noble Truth or the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truth, that's you have at least 16 moments.
Hmm.
It's not possible to know all this simultaneously. Therefore, when we're saying that a mind knows these three simultaneously, I mean, usually it's asserted that you know them one after the other, but you don't have to take big breaks and think about it once again. Like knowing them simultaneously doesn't literally mean with one mind. I mean, well, it's definitely debated. It's definitely something that is debated. So chicha dutowa. In Tibetan, it says knows them simultaneously. So, but just knowing, I mean, you could also say that it's the correct reason of those, but that would mean you already know that sound is impermanent. If you know that it's all three modes simultaneously, so it is that it's the forward pervasion, it's the it's the forward pervasion, it's the counter pervasion, and it's the calor. How do you say that?
Property of the
The property
subject.
of the subject is the property of the subject. If it knows all of them simultaneously, then it knows it's a correct reason, you could argue, right? And if you know it's a correct reason, then it already knows that sound is impermanent, or pot is impermanent in the case of the pot. So I'm trying to think. Yeah, so simultaneously, I guess there are different ways of answering this because the texts are just saying simultaneously, you know the three modes simultaneously, and it's up to you to then figure out what it means. I wouldn't be surprised that some would say just knowing that it's all three, but without knowing yet that it's the correct reason. It could be that. But I think it makes more sense to know the three definitions and then simultaneously doesn't literally mean simultaneously, but with with one continuum of mind without having to change back and forth, but just knowing one after the other. That's what I would say.
Mm.
Yeah. That was
Okay.
your question?
Yeah, that definitely helps.
Okay.
And
But again,
so
I don't know. You see, like, why does it say chikchar? Right? Chikchar means simultaneously. So, it's a little, it doesn't sit too well. But then again, there are a lot of places in the text where it's pretty clear that when you know, for instance, the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truth, that it cannot be a single mind, like a single moment, that it's different moments. So here, through familiarity, could you know two things at the same time? Of course, you could then say, well, you can also know vase and pillar at the same time. You can know vase and pillar, the two vase and pillar, for instance, but it doesn't say simultaneously. It just says there's a conceptual consciousness apprehending vase and pillar. Yeah, there is. One first it knows vase and then it knows pillar. But then through familiarity, maybe it is possible to know both. Because, for instance, you say that conceptual consciousness apprehending the impermanence of sound, it knows both sound and its impermanence. So the impermanence of sound and the sound are different objects, different ways of getting at them. And so here we say it knows both sound and sound's impermanence.
Mm.
So in the end, I'm just presenting more debates.
Okay.
It's always easier to debate than to really answer. And our teachers would always say when there wasn't like a particular answer, or you can answer it this way, but you could also answer in a different way, they would then say, "I'll just debate it." That was then their response. Yeah. So there's so many cases, and like I said, I think I said during one of our earlier classes, I said there are some things you ask 5 people, you can get 5 different answers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay. And then it's sometimes also to do with the kanzen. Like I used to go down for the winter debate, the Paramanavartika winter debate. So I joined the monasteries a few times before they figured out I was there and I was banned. Well, before they made that rule. But anyway, so I went a few times, and so at that time, I noticed it has very much to do also with the kanzen. So every kanzen, every hostel, has got their main teacher, and then the teacher says this, and everyone basically says the same thing, and then there's a different kanzen. And of course, they don't always, but oftentimes they have a tendency. If, for instance, well, Geshe Pandita from Drepung Losang Ling, he has a certain view, and many of disciples hold that view as well. Yeah. So, but it's neither. It's not wrong as one way of saying this, and then there's another way of saying, saying it. So it's not that one is wrong. It's really hard to determine. Yeah. All right. It is said that the pot is the explicit object of the conceptual cognition apprehending a pot, and the opposite of non-pot is the implicit object of the conceptual consciousness cognition apprehending a pot. Likewise, the inferential cognition, realizing that sound is impermanent, explicitly cognizes sound as impermanent, and implicitly, cognizes sound as not permanent. Yeah, that happens definitely simultaneously. So it is said that sound as impermanent is the explicit object of that inferential cognition, and sound as not permanent is the implicit object of that inferential cognition, which is just another way of saying sound being impermanent is the explicit object of that inferential cognition, and sound not being permanent, the implicit object. Okay, so that's, I guess, clear. What about the opposite of non-pot? Is that the explicit object of the eye consciousness apprehending pot or not? The opposite from not pot. Is that the implicit object or the explicit object of the eye consciousness apprehending pot?
Implicit.
Implicit.
Okay. Take the subject, the opposite of not pot. It follows it is impermanent
Why?
Why?
Oh, wait.
because it is pot. Whatever is a pot is necessarily impermanent. It's impermanent, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So the opposite of non-pot, first of all, since it is pot, it must be impermanent. Pot is the opposite of non-pot, and the opposite of non-pot is pot. So it's impermanent. Take take the opposite of non-pot. It follows that it appears to the eye consciousness apprehending pot.
Agree.
Mm.
Those who it follows that it does not appear to that eye consciousness. It follows that it appears because pot and the opposite of non-pot are the same substantial entity in terms of object, time, and nature.
I guess reason not established.
The reason it's established because it's set in Mencius Darbo's commentary on the Pranavatika, illuminating the intent of the exposition on valid cognition. He says very clearly that yes, these two, the vase, the pot, and the opposite of non-pot, they have this relationship of being one substantial entity in terms of time, in terms of object, time, and nature.
Okay.
So therefore, it follows. Take the subject, the opposite of non-pot. It follows that it's the explicit object of an eye consciousness apprehending pot.
Except.
Yeah, that's correct. It is. So in the case of the opposite of non-pot, or in the case of an eye consciousness or a sense consciousness, the opposite of whatever is of not being its main object, that always appears to it. In the case of a conceptual mind, it's different. In the case of a conceptual mind, being an engagement via exclusion, therefore it doesn't appear to it. It's implicitly known. Okay. Yeah. All right. Likewise, in inferential cognition, oh, I did that already. Okay. As for the focal object, now that term is really important. As for the focal object of that cognition, there are different ways of positing this depending on context. It may be the basis on which the mind acts to eliminate false superimpositions. Okay. Now, it may be the basis on which the mind acts to eliminate false superimpositions. False superimposition. Usually a superimposition is always false, but okay. I'd say. Right? I mean, are there correct superimpositions? So it's like a mind acts to eliminate a false superimposition. So what would be an example of a false superimposition? Permanence, for instance. Permanence of a particular object that is not permanent. What is the basis? Well, is that object itself. For instance, the vase. A vase is the basis on which the mind, apprehending the impermanence of vase, eliminates the false superimposition of the permanence of vase. So that's one way in which we talk about a focal object, or it may be the basis or ground on which various false superimpositions are imputed by the mind. Oh, likewise, we can do it the other way around. We can also falsely apprehend that sound is permanent. Again, the focal object would be permanent, would be sound, sorry. Falsely apprehending sound to be permanent. What is the focal object? It's sound. So whether you get it right or not, so it's, in other words, it's saying this. There are minds that just perceive one particular object. So if you say A and B, right? A as in like a basis, B a characteristic. Well, there are minds that just perceive A, just perceive vase, just perceive sound, just perceive table and so forth. But then there are also minds, and these are conceptual. They're conceptual minds. Well, no. You could also take an eye consciousness, for instance, that perceives the horns of a rabbit to be, the ears of a rabbit to be the horns of a rabbit. So the focal object would be the ears of the rabbit, but they are misapprehended to be the horns of a rabbit. Or a particular person perceiving a particular person to be one's father. There you have A, the basis, and then that is apprehended to be B, one's father, or in the case of a wrong consciousness. And this is also the case. This is also true for non-conceptual minds, such as for an I consciousness apprehending the horns of a rabbit. So in that case, the focal object are the horns, the ears of the rabbit, which are then apprehended to be the horns of a rabbit. So A is B. Okay. Now, with a conceptual mind, you can have the same scenario here. You can have a conceptual consciousness apprehending a particular person to be one's father, or the ears of a rabbit to be one's to be the horns of a rabbit. That's possible. But also in terms of impermanence, understanding certain characteristics about a phenomenon. A phenomenon like a table's impermanence, a table's being a table being a product, a table's lack of inherent intrinsic existence, or a person lacking being empty, or lacking a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. In all of these cases, the focal object is the basis. For instance, taking the last example, the I, that is the focal object, and on that basis, the mind negates a self-sufficient, substantially existent person, or self, so a substantially existent self. Okay. So that's how the term is used a lot. For instance, if you debate on, like, for instance, if you debate on emptiness, like okay, this is not a Sautrantrika debate, but then later on when you study Prasangika or Svatantrika or even Chittamatra, emptiness is mentioned. And in the case of giving the example of conceptual consciousness apprehending or realizing emptiness, well, what is the focal object? You have to specify. In this case, what is the focal object? Well, maybe sound or the self or whatever it is. In the case of a meditative equipoise, what is the focal object? All phenomena. So all phenomena, the meditative equipoise realizing emptiness, the direct realization of emptiness, its focal object are all phenomena. But from that, we can also know that the focal object doesn't necessarily have to be apprehended by the mind. Of course, in the case of the horns of a rabbit, the ears of the rabbit are not apprehended. It's the focal object, but it's not an actual object of that mind. In other words, it's neither an appearing object nor an engaged object. Does that make sense? In the case of the ears of the rabbit appearing to be the horns of the rabbit don't appear to that wrong consciousness, and they're certainly not the apprehend or the engaged object. Okay, hopefully that's clear. So that's one way. It's the basis, on the basis of which you perceive something correctly or incorrectly. For example, sound is the basis on which an inferential cognition realizing sound to be impermanent acts to eliminate false superimpositions, and it's the basis or ground of false superimpositions imputed by a conceptual cognition apprehending sound as permanent. Therefore, it is said to be the focal object of both cognitions. Also, both the inferential cognition realizing sound to be impermanent and the conceptual cognition apprehending sound to be permanent must be posited as cognitions whose ways of apprehending are directly contradictory. Oh yeah, this is also a very important concept, or a very important phrase, that you say the mind that realizes sound to be impermanent and the mind that apprehends sound to be permanent, those two cognitions, their ways of apprehending are directly contradictory based on the same focal object. Right? What is the focal object? Sound. What are the two things that are directly contradictory?
Permanent and impermanent.
Yeah. So when could that be important? When could that be really, really important?
To realize the forward pervasion and the proof that sound is impermanent.
Well, to realize the four pervasions.
Yeah, there's a quote that we were given where it says like to realize the forward privation in the proof that sound is impermanent.
Forward.
Oh, yes, we have to have the three cognitions in order to know the forward pervasion. You have to have three cognitions, and one of them is to know that the predicate and its opposite are direct opposites. Yeah. So permanent and impermanent. No, but in particular, think of the Prasangika school. How do we get rid of afflictions? How do we get rid of afflictions?
To see the I as permanent or impermanent? Antidotes.
Yes, the contaminated and uncontaminated are directly the antidote.
No.
No?
Yeah. Well, yes, but what is the main cause? What is the main cause for all our suffering?
Self-grasping.
Self-grasping. We can even talk
For
from the
example.
point of view of the Satantrika school. That works. So in the Satantrika school, what is the root cause for all our afflictions?
Self-grasping ignorance.
Grasping at what?
Self-grasping ignorance.
Yeah, what does that perceive, that self-grasping ignorance? What does it exactly perceive?
Autonomous, separate,
Autonomous self.
self.
A permanent self. A permanent self, take the subject, the mind that apprehends a permanent self. That's the root cause of all our trouble? A permanent self?
An autonomous self.
Autonomous.
Autonomous. What do you mean with an autonomous self?
Self-sufficient, substantially. Okay, wait, which school?
Satantrika.
Self-sufficient,
Satantrika, yeah.
substantially existent. So
Yeah. Okay, so in order to eliminate that particular view, what do you have to realize?
the emptiness of such a self.
Selflessness.
So you have to, therefore, if the mind that is the root cause of all our afflictions and therefore of all our suffering is the mind that perceives the I as existing self-sufficiently and substantially, as a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. You now have to develop a mind that is directly contradictory to that mind, having observed the same focal object, right? What would that mind be?
Yeah, good. The focal object or the mind?
The focal object is the same, the I.
The I.
The focal object is the same. So if so just think of A as B, right? A is B. The I is A.
Yes.
Okay, the I is A. B is self-sufficient, substantially existent self.
Yep.
The I exists, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The I exists, of course. There's an I. But it doesn't exist as a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. Therefore, A exists, B doesn't. And now in order to eliminate that mind, A is B, that perceives A as B, you have to perceive A as non-B.
Except.
So on the same basis A is the same. You just need to perceive the opposite.
Except. Yeah.
Right?
So
Yeah. Except, I'm glad you do.
Hard to do.
I'm pleased to hear you do. So therefore, the direct antidote to all our afflictions is a mind that is directly contradictory in terms of what it apprehends, having observed this or observing the same focal object. Right? Okay, so that's really important. That's the only direct antidote there is, because when you eliminate you can only eliminate that root misconception by apprehending the opposite of what it apprehends, but on the basis of the same object. So A is non-B. Yeah. So in Prasangika, in all the schools, that's extremely important, or it's used a lot. That term is at least used a lot. Okay. Yes.
The term focal object seems to be somehow related to the subject, like of a syllogism.
Yes, you're right.
Is it the same? Like they are mutually inclusive? Are they mutually inclusive?
Well, one is the subject of a syllogism, one is the object of a mind. So from the perspective of being the object of a mind, we don't call it the subject. So if I were to say,
Right.
take the subject, take the conceptual or the inferential cognition, apprehending, sound is impermanent. What is the subject? You'd be like, what? What are you talking about? Like if you if you were to posit the reason on the basis of which that inferential cognition has arisen, then it would be the subject, sound. It is impermanent because it's a product. However, you don't use the same terminology, subject. You don't use it for the conceptual mind. But in both cases, whether you talk about the syllogism, that which is the syllogism, that which is the subject of the syllogism, is the focal object of the inferential cognition. Yeah. So what is it? In both cases, it's sound.
And a focal object only exists in conceptual minds?
No, no, no. Like I said before, if you perceive a person to be your father, the focal object is the person, and perceiving this person to be a father, or if you perceive a vase to be a vase, right? Remember, we talked about this before. I said there's a difference between knowing Kelsey and knowing she is Kelsey. I can know her, but not know who Kelsey is. And then through familiarity, I mean, of course, I would have to be really familiar with Kelsey, so that if I see her, I could actually know, oh, this is Kelsey. Does that make sense? So I have to have a certain degree of familiarity. But in the case of knowing she is Kelsey, what do I know is Kelsey? She is Kelsey. So you have A, Kelsey, being B, Kelsey. So in that case, so being Kelsey, really what it means is this person that appears to my mind is Kelsey. So Kelsey is Kelsey, in other words.
But for you to know that Kelsey is Kelsey, you need a conceptual mind, right?
No, like according to Lati Rinpoche, who says even your eye consciousness can know that this is your father. Taking that view. Okay, so some would disagree and say to realize something is such and such, you need to have a conceptual mind. But going along or basing our assertions on Lati Rinpoche's statement, let's say, yes, it's possible with an eye consciousness. So therefore, a vase being a vase. The focal object is vase. Being a vase is then what is apprehended.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But whenever you have a focal object, you kind of have a thesis, right? You kind of have a focal object that has some characteristic or that has like some predicate kind of.
Depends on what you mean with predicate. Kelsey being Kelsey, is Kelsey being Kelsey a predicate?
I mean, it's a little bit of a thesis, right? Take Kelsey, it follows it is Kelsey. It's a bit weird to put it in this way, but it is.
I know.
Like,
It's
right?
a thesis. But what is it's like a thesis. I mean, when you talk about when you talk about science and reasonings, yes, you can describe that as a thesis. But here we're not using that terminology. We're talking about a mind. Right? So it's different. Again, like I said before, sound is the subject of the syllogism that serves as the cause for an inferential cognizer apprehending sound is impermanent, but it's not the subject of that inferential cognizer. So you don't use that same terminology. In a way, yes, if you were to talk about science and reasoning, you could say it's a thesis. Yes, it's that thesis. But we have to move away from that terminology in the context of Lorig or in the context of what we're studying here, because people get confused. Thesis? What are you talking about? Kelsey is Kelsey. What thesis?
Right.
Yeah. All right. Yes, please.
But don't you think that it's all our sense consciousness that will recognize Kelsey? Or for example, a baby, he doesn't have the eye consciousness. The eyes is not well known, but through hearing her mom and through the smell also. It's not only the...
No, of course you're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
It's all the sense consciousness.
Yes,
to
yes,
recognize
yes.
something. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the thing is, of all our sense consciousnesses, when they're fully developed, the most dominant is the eye consciousness. And therefore, in Buddhist examples, you usually use the visual objects. Hardly ever. I mean, it's vase and pillar and vase. It's hardly ever the sound of water and so forth. Only when it's necessary to talk about an object of the ear consciousness. So therefore, you're right. Absolutely, can be a little bit confusing that it's always an eye consciousness that is mentioned, but just because it's the the dominant sense consciousness.
But for me, I realized when I am with with my daughter, I
Yes.
have the grandchild, which is very young. And then as soon as you hear the mother, and she comes just near, the baby changed totally. I mean, so
Oh,
I
yeah,
said,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he
Yeah,
recognized her for
absolutely.
sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The smell, the sound, all of that we definitely recognize, or babies definitely recognize. So yeah, the visual aspect may come later, but I think then as we develop, as a child develops, it becomes the visual consciousness or the eye consciousness that's much more predominant. I would say we're no longer aware of like the person. We don't smell. I mean, we actually do smell them, but we're not aware of it. We're so focused on the external and don't realize that we may even find the smell pleasant or not. You know, there are all these experiments. Like they have like some women's sniff at the t-shirts of 5 guys who've just played basketball and they've been really sweaty, and so they should pick the smell. They're like, well, that sounds disgusting, but anyway, they should pick the smell that they think is most attractive. And then later on, when they visually also pair them, interestingly, the person's smell and their visual aspect often match. So, but we're not aware. We probably think it's the external more than it is actually the smell. Why? Because we are so used to the visual. The visual takes over, whereas a blind person definitely has a more developed hearing and more developed smell. Right? So this is also interesting in terms of training. Going back to training, um, our eye consciousness is really well trained, but we neglected therefore the other consciousnesses a little bit. And again, in the case of a child that can smell their mother or can hear the voice, versus us, we may not even recognize the voice. We recognize our mother more independence on visual cues.
But as well as body consciousness, because I worked a lot with blind people, and
Yeah.
as soon as you go near somebody, they can feel there is someone, there is something also, like a wall or whatever. They know that there is an object.
Yes, yes, yes.
We're not aware, but they do.
Yeah,
Really.
probably through sound as well. Through
Yeah, it's
sound.
the reflection, I think, that like the echo. There
Yeah,
is
the
something
echo.
they
Yeah, yeah.
move and they can perceive that there is something, or they can perceive that there is nothing that is vast. Because I was
Right.
speaking to blind people, and they were aware that, oh, nice, yeah, it's like the mountain is far away, and it was
Right.
right.
Yes. Yeah.
It was amazing for that. Yeah.
Right. So we only know this through our visual consciousness, but of course their sense consciousnesses have developed differently, had to develop differently. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let me just finish that last bit. Apprehending are directly contradictory, having observed the same focal object. In general, whether an instance of awareness has realized a given object is determined on the basis of whether it has obtained that object.
What does that
Obtained.
mean?
Yeah,
So
well, it says top top also in Tibetan. Yeah, whether it has obtained that object. So whether it has become its object, whether an instance of awareness has realized. Again, I wouldn't, in Tibetan it sounds fine, but in English it doesn't. Like I'm going to translate that second volume soon into German. I'm not going to say obtained. I don't think it's important. It's not, it's just a way of speaking, like having obtained that object, it has become that object. But in English, you just wouldn't use that word in the same way. Has realized a given object is determined on the basis of whether something has become its object, right? Whether it has become so obtained in that sense. And that term is really used rarely, but it can be used in a wider sense. Obtained can be used in a wider sense than it can be in English. It is those states of mind that remain steady, like a tent stake planted into dry ground, that realize their object. So only if the object is apprehended in a steady fashion. If your mind is all over the place, in other words, right? If your mind is all over the place, you've got a second to focus on the vase, and then you're distracted by something else and so forth. Well, in that moment, it's like your mind is like a stake plunged into a muddy ground. There's no way you can realize something. Therefore, it needs a certain degree of attentiveness or focus. And where does that become most obvious, well, when you want to realize emptiness, you need to it's not enough to just inferentially realize emptiness or selflessness for that matter, even for the Tantrika school. You must develop a union of tranquil abiding or calm abiding and special insight. Because otherwise your mind is like, it's too distracted, and you'll never really develop that mind into a direct antidote to all your afflictions. So this is basically what this is saying. Even for an ordinary mind, a certain degree of steadiness needs to be there, focus, attentiveness, like a tent stake planted into dry ground that realize their object. But minds that are unsteady, like a stake plunged into a bog, cannot realize their object. So into a bog, like in Tibetan it says mud. There are also different modes in which cognition of an object takes place, such as the following: directly cognizing through perception, such as an eye consciousness cognizing the pot in front of it, and cognizing by means of inference or reasoning, such as a mind cognizing from afar the presence of fire on a mountain pass through directly seeing smoke issuing from that place. Great. Okay, so there's one issue I wanted to mention today. I'm not 100% sure, but tomorrow Kyabche Jadu Rinpoche will give a teaching at Gyudo, which I would like to attend. But I don't know the time. I haven't figured out the time yet. There's a lot of rumors going around what time it's going to be. I've just had 1:30, or I just got a message saying it was 1:30. But that would mean we couldn't have class tomorrow. So it's tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. I hope that's okay. What to do. I don't think we can reschedule it because your schedule doesn't allow any rescheduling. I'll let Kelsey know, or I can also put it in the group. If there's some change, if it's in the morning, then I'll be back in time for this class. I don't know about Friday because Friday maybe a little bit longer. Yeah. Anyway, just to let you.
Kishima, if it is late, you can just come to Tosamling from Gyuto.
I know I can, but right now I have this other class, and I'm preparing these handouts, which takes forever. The class is not the main issue. The problem are the handouts. So once I'm done with that, then I've got a little bit more time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
hope we can see you face to face at some
Yeah,
point.
I know. I hope I can see you face,
Yeah.
because some of your faces I've never seen but on the screen. Of course, some of your faces I know personally, but yeah. All right. Great. So anyway, I'll let you know. Please continue reading the next chapters, next 2-3 pages of what comes after. I don't know.
Does an
how-
image appear to sense recognition?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Continue from there. We'll continue that way. Okay. Thank you.
Dedication.
Yes,
Having
please.
thoroughly investigated in accord with all that I've heard day and night through the four reasonings, mind born of reflection on these topics of contemplation, may this discernment sever all doubts.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna.